Welcome to the latest episode of County Conversation, the Cricketers' weekly podcast covering all things UK domestic cricket. As ever, we'll be lifting the lid on county cricket and feature me, your host Cameron Ponsonby, and a selection of the Cricketers' award-winning team. This week, I'm joined by two of the finest wrist spinners in the country. Left-arm wrist spinner Nick Friend of Middlesex under-15s fame, and right-arm leggy Mason Crane of Hampshire, Sussex, England. And now Glamorgan. Welcome to you both. I look forward to asking you both about the kind of the finest art that this sport has in everything. But before we get into that part, Mason, first of all, thank you very much for joining us. I don't want to ask you about leg spin. I want to ask you about batting, because you are fresh off a career best of 61, a maiden first-class half-century. My two questions are, one, how many times have you clicked on your Cricinfo profile this week to see that number in the 50 column? And two, how many times have you gone back on the YouTube live stream to analyse your innings, just check that you did indeed pull Chris Germain over mid-wicket for 6?
Well, yeah, thank you for asking me about that. I presume, when I was asked to come on here, we were going to talk about my batting.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I have watched it a few times. I have watched every ball at least 2 or 3 times. Yeah, it was great fun, I've got to say, and I was in quite unfamiliar territory once I got into sort of the 40s and 50s there. But yeah, no, it's been a long time coming, to be honest. The amount of effort and thought I put into my batting, I thought it was about time I got a good score.
Were you nervous in the 40s? I noticed the shot that got you to 50. I would love to say it was a kind of beautiful caress through the offside. It was probably the worst of the boundaries I saw, quite ugly. But was that a reaction of like, I need to get there now, and I'm petrified that this is my chance?
No, do you know what? I wasn't really thinking about it, to be honest, because we also had the batting point in the background as well, which I was focused on. But once I got in, I don't know, I just sort of felt very calm throughout. I was more nervous passing my previous highest score. I actually played a few rash shots, and I walked down to Colin and said, I need to calm down a bit here, because I'm so desperate to score this one more run. But yeah, when I got to 40, it was absolutely fine. It was obviously when I was younger, I scored hundreds and stuff in club cricket and school cricket and stuff, so I was okay with that. But yeah, I was sort of more focused on the point and what Mir was going to do at the other end, to be honest, because although he said he'd stick with me to the point, I didn't really know what he was going to do after that.
And on a more serious note, has that been a conscious kind of decision on your part to work on your batting? As a leggy in England, it feels like everything has to go in your favour to get a game. It's got to be the right wicket, it's got to be the right ground. It's got to have the right feel to the team balance. You've got to be able to bat potentially. Is this been a conscious decision to try and make yourself more selectable for more games? And in general, yeah, how much do you feel has to be in your favour to kind of get a game in English domestic cricket?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, consciously, I have worked really hard on my batting. I always have, to be honest. I think when I was younger, I probably thought I'd bat a bit more than I have done so far in my career. But I think particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, I've really turned a corner with it, whether that's me sort of, been around sort of the game long enough now to have the experience and be able to manage the game better, and obviously get used to the pace of the game, things like that. But obviously it massively helps, if you can bat, you're obviously going to play a lot more games. But like you're saying, at times it can be tough to get a game, and well, the past 2 seasons I've barely played, but played a lot of second team where I've batted well and scored runs, and yeah, I would have been an all-rounder in those games. So I think the last couple of years since I've really turned a corner with it, I just haven't played so much. So yeah, maybe this has been a long time coming, but like you said, you can't just bowl leg spin anymore, in the same way that you can't really just do one thing for anything, really, and you can't just bat and not field. You can't just bowl fast and not contribute in other ways. So although it's probably exaggerated for spinners, I think it's the same for everything now. You've got to add more to your game.
And you're one away now from the Holy Trinity of 1 to 11, aren't you? It's what is it, number 7 still? Get out of the order, get yourself up.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, so I have made the coach aware. and I have said at some point during this season, I really would like to just walk in at 7. But yeah, no, that's also part of it. You've got to try and put your hand up and do night watchman and things like that to just try and add value to the team. Really, like you said, especially when it's tough to get a game anyway. Anyway, you can add value, you got to take it.
How much? I mean, obviously, we brought you to talk about leg spin as much as I'd happily watch back the 61 or the 28 off 190 or whatever it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
The real vigil. It feels like every April there is surprise when leg spinners take wickets, but increasingly that seems to be the norm. Obviously, Cam Steele's top of the list at the moment, but I mean, we've spoken before. Matt Parkinson as well as taking a lot of wickets in April's for Lancs particularly, but took 5 for Kent last week. I mean, what is it about it that I don't know that has worked for you? And do you know why you've been picked in those games particularly, but also why you found you've got stuff out of the surfaces and where you have played?
Yeah, I think a lot's made of obviously April, and everyone presumes it's this month where no one ever scores a run and the ball seems all over the place and spinners never beat a bowl. But actually, when you play 14 games a year and 4 or 5 of them are in April, at some point, people they're gonna bowl, they're gonna take wickets, and the pitches they don't do as much in April, anywhere near as much as September. September's the month for me where you get the really low scores and you get tired wickets anyway. You get teams needing a result. You get weather around, things like that. April, everyone starts with a clean slate. Every team really wants to play on good wickets and try and have good games of cricket. So I think you get some pretty decent wickets in April at times. And then obviously this year we've had the Kookaburra ball as well. Which obviously seen a few seamers around struggle with. Teams obviously a lot of the time opted for that extra spinner. So it's one of those months where there's a lot spoken about it. But it seems the moment you cross into May, everything's okay. But there's a lot of championship cricket played in April, and there always has been. So
obviously, you didn't start the season in the first of those cricket games. I mean, we were both there. We chatted at the time about it. But is it? Has that been a positive in a sense that you sort of feel more? I guess that did prove, if it needed proving, sort of the importance of difference, variety, leg spin in those games on flatter wickets. I know Sam Northeast and Grant Bradburn were both pretty happy to put their hands up afterwards and say, probably got that one wrong. 600 odd for whatever it was. I don't know. Has that helped at all, or sort of look back and wish you'd played, or I don't know. Where are you with that odd 4 days?
Yeah, it's one of those where I think at the time, obviously, I really would have obviously liked to have played. Game at Lord's, flat wicket, Kookaburra ball, those things. But in the long run, it's probably going to help because it's probably highlighted that you do need difference in your attack. It's probably highlighted that I've said for a long time, 5 seamers is probably one too many in any scenario, really, because if you need 5 seamers, then 4 is probably enough if it's going to seam around. And if it's not going to seam around, it's going to be flat, then you're probably going to want a spinner who can bowl a few more overs at one end and rotate everyone a bit more. So I think it's probably highlighted that at times, you need variety, you need a bit of difference, whether that's pace, whether that's spin, even if that's a left arm or something like that. I think that's maybe what the Kookaburra ball has highlighted more than anything else, really. And
I guess by the same token, you get the opposite one, don't you? Get where there's the whole if it seems it spins, but often on those occasions as well, you don't get spinners picked because if it seems it's often done before you might get a go. Like there was that game. Oh, I can't remember. Was it you guys? Sorry, you guys down at Hampshire rather. The game last year where that Hampshire ended up being dot points for, which low scoring, seam all the way. You almost look at that afterwards and go, like, why would you pick a spinner kind of thing? Like, I guess particularly if you've got someone in the top 6 who can bowl a bit. I mean, Liam Dawson's case, you can bowl. Like, is that is that where you find your opportunity sort of shutting down? That if you're not getting picked when it's flat, then you're not going to get picked when it's green. You're not going to get picked when it's a bit questionable. Where does your opportunity come?
Yeah, and I think that's where I think more than pitches and conditions or anything like that, I think the attitude, everyone's attitude towards spin bowling and team selection and things like that are more important. I think hopefully what the Kookaburra ball's doing and what I like is that it's maybe changing people's attitude towards, okay, we'll have 4 seamers in our side. If it seams around, that should definitely be enough because there's loads in there for them. But come day 3 and 4, we'll have the spinner in anyway. And like I've said to you before, if I had a pound every time someone ever said to me, wish you were playing today, and we get to day 4 and they go, oh, we wish you in the side, and should have picked you in this one or something like that. I think hopefully the attitude's changing on that and going, well, let's not pick the team just for day 1. Let's get the spinner in, and hopefully, like you said, if it seems around that much, then you don't need 5 seamers anyway.
Because you've been in 3 times the number of squads, match day squads, than games you've played in, roughly speaking.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I think, like I said to you, I've played 50 odd games. So I've definitely 12th manned in over 100 games. That's not, that's not a insignificant number. And obviously in some of those I would have never bowled a ball. That's fine, but I think there are definitely games in there where I would have bowled a fair amount had I been picked. Yeah.
How do you incentivize? I mean, obviously Kookaburra is one option, one way they've looked at doing it. How would you better incentivize counties to pick leggies? Or pick spinners more generally, but leg spinners particularly. Is there? You've sort of thrown a few ideas out there in the past and stuff. And what I don't know. What would you do? What can you do? I guess, like, if we take the schedule as it is and the games as they are, I don't know, how can you better incorporate?
Well, I think obviously one way that's been said a lot, and it's said a few times, obviously when I wasn't selected in the first week, was could you have a sub? Could you have a sub after the first innings of a championship game? Could you name a 12 and bring one in halfway through the game? Would it fix everything? No, but what that would do is the spinner would get a bowl every week, and it's a bowl in 1 innings more than they would have done. And in my view, over time, I think there's a lot of bowlers around the country that if they came in for a second innings, they'd get trusted more and more. And I think over time, you'd probably find those guys in the starting 11, and you might not need the substitute anymore. But that's something that's definitely been floated out there. Obviously, the Kookaburra ball probably helps you pick a spinner because you know that there's going to be a dead period where someone's going to have to bowl and a seamer's going to get nothing from it. Having said that, how soft and dead these balls go, is it sometimes harmful that spinners are bowling? Yes, they're bowling and it's great, but when the ball's not doing anything, not bouncing, and it's bowling with an orange, is that always a good thing? I don't know, but yes, I think there's different ways to look at it, but ultimately, it's the attitude's got to change.
Would you say, because the impact sub rule is obviously a topic of debate in like the IPL at the moment, I think in general it's probably being like criticised as kind of it takes away a tactical element of the game. Do you have a split opinion on that in terms of in red ball you'd actually be in favour of people having a substitute and the option of a substitute, and you think it would be beneficial to kind of English cricket or whatever country's cricket? Then on the flip side, you'd be like, yeah, is your opinion consistent on that? Would you also think the impact sub is a good idea in T20 cricket, or would you like to see, county championship, let's have a sub, give people a chance to develop, don't let it near the blast, basically?
Yeah, well, my opinion's split in that I don't really want to be a substitute or be subbed off or anything. I don't really think that's part of cricket anyway. But in terms of thinking of ways for to have a more interesting game of cricket and involve more skill sets, and it seems to me like the obvious answer. Yet the sort of cricket fan and supporter in me goes, well, that's not right, and it would be a bit iffy anyway. But like I said, if it got you an extra bowl every week, and you had all those games which become dead rubbers because a team hasn't picked a spinner and then it goes dead on day 4 and there's footholes that no one can bowl at, or all those games where the heavy roller kills the wicket and teams suddenly just shut down and go for a draw. It would make those games more interesting. But at the same time, that's why there's 11 in team sports as 11 because there's always one skill set that's sort of underpowered over the other. You know, you've got to make a compromise. So yeah, I'm not really necessarily for it, but it would short term solve a bit of a problem.
So it's that great thing as a fan, isn't there? Like I was at Lord's for all 4 days, the Glamorgan game, and like there is that bit of you that's like when you've got 600 and you see it flat and you see it doing nothing and Middlesex start quite comfortably. Part of you sat there is like, well, how are they going to do this now? Because they've sort of like sat there watching it like, well, they've ballsed this up. Like there have been 3 wickets in a million years, and how are they going to take 20 of them? And like that is the argument against it. It's like you sort of take your medicine, don't you? Like that's I don't like in the IPL because like if you don't have to think, you almost we'll just stack the batting and then we'll stack the bowling as and when required. Where there is that almost like Schadenfreude side of it when you watch a side. I think Glamorgan did 230 overs in the field for those 2 days, and it's like, well, it's sort of what you get.
Yeah,
no, I mean?
And that's part of sport. You know, you pick a certain team, you go on a certain pitch, you get it wrong, and you get punished. That's all part of it. And like I said, I'm not necessarily in terms of the sport for it, but in terms of the short-term fix, in those weeks where you go, well, is it now dull to watch because it's just going to be a draw, or you give both teams a bit of a chance, maybe, you never know. I mean, obviously, knowing sport, you put in a rule like a substitute, it would absolutely be abused, and it would be used in different ways, and it wouldn't always be for the spinner. It'd be subbing in an extra batter if you wanted a draw, or it'd be, getting a fresher seamer, things like that. Of course it would. It wouldn't necessarily be for a spinner, but I think having these conversations probably is as important as making the big change.
Is it as important as well when you see guys like, even if it's not you, I mentioned Cam and Cam Steele and Matt Parkinson before, like just seeing other guys have success, is that when you are not endangered, but like, I don't know, sort of constantly maligned as a, how do we get the best out of leggies? When do we pick the leggies? All that kind of stuff. Is it valuable just to see other guys having success?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's good to see because these guys are good bowlers. They're highly skilled. They're highly skilled bowlers. Everyone can see that. Anyone who's sort of been up close to these guys would understand how good they are. So it's great to see. Obviously, other spinners, but leg spinners in particular, doing well. And like you said, it sort of validates that. Yeah, there is a big role for these guys in this format. And when they're sort of unleashed, the sky's the limit for a lot of these people. They're, like I said, they're highly skilled players.
I think it's something that's really interesting about kind of leg spinners is the kind of general theme, and we're touching on it here about like they're often over promoted and underdeveloped. So take yourself, like Matt Parkinson, Ryan Armour to an extent, go all the way back to Scott Borthwick. You've got people who like are picked for England really early, and they have that kind of promotion potentially before their time or whatever, which is as much of a kind of symptom of people not understanding the skill as in the subsequent not playing kind of thing. If we're talking about people don't just get it, what would you say to those who kind of look at a Cricinfo profile and go, oh, he's averaging 40 in first class cricket, like what am I missing? That's kind of, there's got to be the other side of the argument where people look at this and they might say Crane's not getting picked because he averages 40 in first class cricket, not because he's a leg spinner. Like, what do you kind of say to that kind of blunt reply, basically?
Well, I mean, firstly, average is an average. It's what it is. The same as a batting average. No one's ever scored 37.2 in a game. It's basically how often do you get it right and the conditions are in your favour and you bowl them out, basically. You as a spinner in 4-day cricket, you end up bowling a lot of dead overs. Like I said earlier, you end up bowling. I bowled a lot in Northampton this week for an hour and a half, knowing they were going to declare any minute with most of the field out, just trying to go at 4 and over because we're so far behind in the game. Things that happen, there has to be context to every statistic, but there's more to it than just average. You can't put 4 of the same bowler in a team just because they all got a low bowling average and expect to bowl a team out for 100 every time. It's not going to happen because different conditions, different pitches, different grounds, all those sorts of things. But as you mentioned, a few of us there who have all sort of had a bit of a go, a brief go. One thing I have always thought as well is there's no sort of England contract for spin bowlers, but there's a fast bowling contract for guys who haven't necessarily played for England, not necessarily going to play for England, but they sort of take control of them, look after them. Whereas the spinners, it seems to me like, they come in, they have a bit of a go, and then there's nothing sort of tying you to the setup whatsoever. Really, it's entirely on you to get back there or fall away. That's also something I guess could be looked at. But like I said about the statistic point, you could make a point for all those things. But ultimately, it's where you play your cricket. It's the situations you find yourself in that really dictate what a statistic means.
What do you think of like a ECB, like a spinner's central contract could look like? I remember chatting to one kind of county, a cricket coach, and this was his idea. He was kind of like, I would like to see spinners centrally contracted by the ECB and basically loaned out across the season to whichever county needed a player. And I couldn't quite wrap my head around like that shape of like, so someone could play for 6 counties in a year. And his point was like, if your ultimate aim is developing players, that's the way to get them a game. I'm not saying that's what your version of it looks like, but in terms of, how would you think that would take shape? If England said to you when you were 22 or whatever, we're contracting you, how do you think that could have benefited you?
Well, I think it would, more than necessarily being loaned out to different sides, it would be more about constant contact with the best coaches available. We all know all spinners are going to play in the second team at some point. That happens. They may even play in the second team for prolonged periods in the year, but what they don't often get a lot of is like a real quality time with a sort of a dedicated spin bowling coach, someone to really look out for you. Every few weeks you get yourself, up to Loughborough, wherever it is, or a coach can come down, you can have a bowl, work on stuff. Obviously, if you're contracted, it keeps you in and around sort of England environments. So you're going to be training, they go, right, come on, in you come, you're coming a bowl at guys trying to learn and improve a lot, rather than sort of sometimes being left to rot a bit and being left on your own. And how many spinners you hear of where they go, he's struggling, or he's having a tough time of it, he's not bowling so well, and no one else has really got the answer. But there's not often that sort of contact to sort of keep them in a good space, and technically more than anything else really, and someone just to be on their side and look out for them.
How rare is it?
One more question.
Go on.
Thank you. It's really boring, this question, so it might not make the edit, but I thought about it earlier and I wondered whether it actually made a difference. Something as tame as between red ball and white ball, you rock up for a T20 game. Obviously, you want a rest spinner because it's like point of difference, etc., blah, blah, blah. But you're also playing in the middle of the ground the whole time. So it's like big all the way around. How often will you rock up for a red ball game and you're playing on the side of the wicket, you've got a 40-yard boundary, and it's like, we just can't pick a leggy this week because they'll get miss hit for 6 for 4 days.
Well, I'm really glad you've brought that up, because I think had we been in the middle at Lords, I think I'd have played definitely.
Yeah.
But you turn up to all these, and the thing is as well, like Northants this week, it's short on one side. You turn up to these grounds and it becomes a bit of that, especially nowadays. People do come out and have a bit of a hack sometimes. You look at it and go, well, yeah, he could bowl the best spell of his life, but ultimately if people can step across and just top edge it for 6, and sort of what's the point? And no, I get it. Like there was a comedy boundary at Edgbaston, wasn't there, last week? It was under 40 meters or something ridiculous like that. And playing at these grounds is great, but if people are going to start turning down singles to the boundary because they're not going to get there, we're in a territory where it's not proper cricket anymore. Again, that can be something that needs to be looked at, because like I said, championship cricket's obviously not on TV. It doesn't need to be right in the middle. But so again, there's something else. You get turn up to an outground. You're the main game, aren't you? Like an outground, you play right in the middle. Yeah, they're smaller in general, but at least it's even. And so you always tend to be playing them. But yeah, it's a point as well no one really thinks about.
I'm delighted about that. It is going to go in the edit. I'm very proud of myself for cutting into the real issues. I did laugh before, just as we finished part 1. There was a clip of Arafat batting for Kent, Arafat Bhuyan, and he hit Kemal Roach for 3 boundaries in a row. and the first one he clips
The
off his leg,
the smallest 6 of all time, isn't it?
toes it, and I went, oh god, that's 4. And then the umpire lifts his arms up in the air. You go, what has happened? What is out there? Anyway, that is the end of part 1. We've got to stop talking about leg spin as much as I love leg spin. I actually prefer off spin. There we go. Part 2. County round 3. Teams actually won some matches. Quick roundup: wins for Essex, Surrey, and Durham in Division 1, and Middlesex and Sussex in Division 2. A third 100 of the season for Joe Clark. And Middlesex, Nick's going to hate this point from me, but it's quite funny. They have a bunch of medium paces. They had across the first 2 weeks of the season 1,200 for 11. Get the Dukes in their hand, nipping Joe Root and Harry Brook out. 250, 150, get a win on the board. I appreciate that lacks nuance, that lacks caveats. I don't care. It looked quite funny from a top line perspective. Anyway, Nick, going to come straight to you. Big news this week. Middlesex moving from Lords, or are they?
Then they're not, are they?
No, that's what it said. That's what the headline said.
That is what the headline said. That's what the headline said. I'm not too fair. I'm not sure that's what the piece said. No,
I don't read those.
not.
I just read the top. I read the headline. That's all I care about.
You don't have your subscription, do you? It's no, they're not moving anytime soon. They I think as their response in the statement put quite bluntly, they don't have the ground to move to, the money to move to a ground to with, or the desire to move away from Lords. I think the truth is that Middlesex has been trying to final turns to Lords for 160 years because they don't play all their games there, and it's not there. It's crucially, so they lose out on a lot of the financial opportunities that you get if you own your own ground. And also, I think just frankly, like on a really granular level, training base wise is chaos. Like they're all over London. They're at Merchant Taylors now, which is a school facility. But if you move to Middlesex to be near the ground, for example, you're suddenly an hour from training and 2 minutes to the ground, and vice versa. And so they're always looking for alternatives. But if you can find a spot in London big enough to build a professional cricket ground on, I mean, bloody hell, like good luck.
I'm quite confused here. So hang on, I saw 3 different headlines. I saw one from the BBC. We can go around wherever. BBC was like, Middlesex considering Lords move after 160 years. I saw on Cricinfo, the quote was that Lords, it could be like the San Siro, which, I mean, does
that mean they'd share it with? Does that mean they'd share it with?
Because there was the argument that there'd be another like 100 teams. You'd host 200 teams there. I also quite laughed at because Middlesex having to play some T20 matches at Essex at Chelmsford this year, and on Middlesex's website it said just a 20-minute train ride from Stratford station. I was like, Stratford's nowhere near Lords. This is like picking up different parts across London. But so basically, what you're saying is the media lied as a whole, and it was false. Are you calling everyone out?
No, not
particularly. Sounded like it.
I think in an ideal world they would have their own grounds. Let's put it that way. No, this is Mason's own ground, of course, for a month of each year. This is he might play as much cricket at Lords as some of those Middlesex lads over the course of summer. But no, they would like to have their own ground, but as I said, like where's that? Where are you going to find that in London? And I think their members quite like going to Lords, and I think people quite like playing at Lords. And but there are challenges with it. Like they don't wheel a square, so they don't wheel a cage on. They've never wheeled a cage onto the main square. You can't really get any consistency. So, for example, the pitch that was played on in the Morgan game was about 12 decks over from the other side of the square to the one in the Yorkshire game, and those two sides of the square play very differently because of where the water seeps to up and down the slope, basically. So one nips, one doesn't. This is really good. This is really fun
that true?
Stuff, isn't it? This is genuinely true.
I'm annoyed. I'm interested. But
this is dull. It's true and it's dull, but it's also true that the side that nips, the side that is meant to nip, is the one that was 600 for 3 versus 600 for 10, and the one that is meant to be flatter is the one that Root and Brook nicked off for naught on. So make it that way you will, but yeah, that's the theory. But yes, it's not an easy place to have your home ground, because similarly when it gets to the Blast, they've never arranged it at Lords, so you don't get any because they can't use the main ground, the main square when they're not playing, because of the relationship and the share with the MCC. So what you end up with is, and I think it's fair to say like it's one of the slightly odder shaped grounds on the circuit. It's not a traditional oval. It's almost like a big square, isn't it? So actually, the dimensions are quite tough there, and you get a lot of Middlesex players getting caught straight at Lords. One of the reasons you think is because if you practiced hitting straight there and you realise how large it was, you would probably look to hit the pockets or often the short side. But because that doesn't really exist, you end up. They're also obviously also just like get stronger and hit it further. But but that is an argument that has been put forward.
Mason, as a kind of professional, how much of a pull is like a ground? Because I remember talking to one pro, and I kind of asked about, do you prefer playing in the smaller grounds when it's a bit fuller, maybe a little bit more atmosphere, or like a big empty Lords in the county championship? And he was like, Lords, 100%. Like, it's Lords. That's so exciting to play there.
It's the lunch,
in terms
isn't
of this is what we're going to find out. Like, yeah, if you had a toss up between Middlesex or whatever, is Lords as an entity a pull for players to want to play for Middlesex?
Well, I mean, the ground's a massive thing because it's your office. You know, you're there not just on match days, but that's where you're going to train. That's where you're going to go in the winter for 6 months. Anytime you do anything, that's where you're going to go. So it is really important. It's an interesting one, Lords, because it's not Middlesex's ground. It's the ground they play at. You know, obviously, I saw the headlines like you guys did, but it'd be a real shame if they moved because obviously everyone wants to play at Lords. You don't want to, like, you know, you are a bit gutted when you're playing against Middlesex and it's an outground
or at Essex.
Chelmsford, yeah. You are a bit gutted because you're like, it could have been Lords. Like Hampshire, the last 3 years we've played T20s at Radlett, and it's just not Lords, is it? You could be at Lords on a Thursday night with a good crowd and all that, and you're not. So it is a shame. It's such an interesting one because imagine calling Lords your home ground. Obviously, I've had the chance to do it for 3 years with the London Spirit. It's amazing, but it's also not their home ground because they don't play there every week. So it's a real tough one. But to go back to your question, I mean, the ground is a lot of the decision because it's literally your office. It's where you go every single day.
I know there's in the main topic of conversation at all times, in my mind at least, Melbourne grade cricket, Melbourne Cricket Club. Their home is the MCG, and they have one match a season where they get to play at the MCG as a bunch of like, admittedly very good clubbies, and just apparently it's just this lottery where there is one other team in the 18, 19, 20 team league. I don't know how many people there are, and they get to play at the MCG each year, and just like the kind of joy and excitement that must present. Anyway, we're going to move on to the next bit of news, and we're going to do a proper episode on this. We've had the Tier 1 women's teams announced from next year. The teams that the ECB have announced, and this is basically the regional sides like South East Stars, Southern Vipers, those are coming to an end, and counties had put in bids to try and host a new Tier 1 women's team. This is starting from next year, and it's Durham, Essex, Hampshire, Lancashire, Nottinghamshire, Somerset, Surrey, and Warwickshire, who are the initial teams. And then joining in 2027 will be Glamorgan and Yorkshire. Nick, you wrote heaps on this across the winter. You spoke to, I think, every single player in the circuit. What are the initial thoughts and reactions, just as a primer for when the deep dig
that's
goes
the word.
on?
I don't know.
I know a lot of words.
Some kind of, I assume that means teaser.
Yes.
Cheers. Naturally, the teams who've got them are very happy, and the teams who haven't got them are not so happy. I think it's probably although there's this really weird situation where you've got the 2027 thing wasn't trailed, wasn't part of the process, was never told to counties as a possibility. And Glamorgan have come away and have said they're delighted. And Yorkshire have come away and written a statement talking about how disappointed and surprised they are. Yeah. So, and it's by 27 rather than in 27. So I suspect that means 26. Which essentially means, two years away rather than 3. So no, it's an interesting one. Like, there are a lot of reasons that a lot of counties thought they put in bids that matched all the criteria. Yorkshire certainly being one. Leicestershire describe themselves as crestfallen. It's 8 moving up to 10, and then 2029. I think there's an option for. Well, I think a couple more will be up to 12. It's tough for some counties because, like, if you're Gloucestershire, for example, who are one of 3 co-hosts at Western Storm, their 2 partners now have teams. Glamorgan from 27, Somerset from 25. Bristol has done a lot for women's cricket, both as sort of the training host of Western Storm, but also such as where a lot of the Storm players live. They've hosted a lot of England women's stuff. They've hosted Storm back to the KSL era as well, and they're now looking at being like, well, actually, if this is being done geographically, sort of where do we fit in going forward? You know, I've not spoken to anyone at Worcester or Derby, but who's to say they wouldn't have bid if they'd known there was an opportunity? Sorry, who's to say? Which way around? They might have bid essentially if they'd known they could bid for 2027. And then likewise bid like clubs like Middlesex who are going through sort of financial strife at the moment might have tailored their bid slightly differently if they know there's an opportunity to enter in 27. So it's complicated. It's been a difficult process because they've tried to do it so quickly because they're trying to push it through to 25. So the bit now that's interesting is the upheaval through this summer. You've got players, almost all of whom are out of contract, almost all of whom are after new clubs, a lot of whom will be relocated because of where their teams now are. I know that's the nature of professional sport, but women's domestic professional cricket is 5 years old in this country. So it's a lot to take in. It'll be an interesting summer while players are trying to play and sort of fight for those deals and remain in form and try and win with their current teams. Likewise, coaches sort of know they need to win or else their new teams might well have different ideas. But once again, I guess that is part of professional sport, but it's pretty interesting, sort of fairly brutal months coming up in that regard.
I think my 2 main takeaways there were one, the it not being trailed that there was the thing for 2027 because you said it could change people's bids, how they structure these things. The other thing I thought was a bit strange when counties went, I felt like we met all the criteria because I was like, anyone who did their A levels like can tell you can get, the university asks for an A and 2 Bs, you get an A and 2 Bs, but you don't get in for other reasons. Like meeting the criteria is the minimum expectation, not the minimum, like the maximum requirement. Anyway, we're moving on to part 3. Time to finish with some questions. We put out the call for some listener questions and you have answered. If you do want to get in touch and have questions for our cast of cricketer journalists or our guest, then please do get in touch on Twitter at The Cricketer Mag, or anything longer can be emailed to website at thecricketer.com. Mason, unsurprisingly, more people wanted to ask you questions than Nick. We've got 3 for you straight off the bat. The first one, which I said I wasn't going to say out loud, but I'm going to do it anyway. Why are you bowling in April? Very blunt, quite funny, but a bit rude. Anyway, second one, a bit nicer. Welcome to Glamorgan, Mason. How are you settling? And how do you think the wicket at Sophia Gardens will suit your bowling?
That's the opposite question.
I've settled in very well, actually. I've absolutely loved every minute. I got there early March. I've been at Glamorgan, so I've actually loved every minute. And I've not played a whole lot at Sophia Gardens in red ball cricket, but hopefully it can spin a bit. And well, now I'm an all-rounder. Now hopefully it flattens out so I can score some more runs as well.
On to go back to boundary dimensions as my favourite topic in the world, bowling, like playing T20 cricket there, how much will that affect the way you bowl? Because it's such a weird ground. It's so wide and short straight. Is the plan basically bowl half trackers and get pulled for 1?
And did you know this before you signed?
It's basically Lords but sideways, isn't it?
I like
whereas
that.
Lords is unbelievably long straight and very short squares. It's sort of the opposite. So, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things.
In the world.
Or I'm going to bowl track downs, like you said. I mean, you just get used to it. It's one of those things. You know, you turn up to different grounds. You got to bowl slightly differently, obviously. At home I might not lob quite as many up to be hit straight, but I've obviously played there a few times. I'll hopefully find a way to get around it.
Thank you, Chris Hughes, for that question. I'm guessing the same Chris Hughes, the Love Island Chris Hughes. I know he's a big fan of the show. The next question we have from you is from Gal Lender, fan from your early Hampshire days. If you could make one change to county cricket, what would it be? Appreciate that's quite a wide-ranging question. But I'm still asking. Yeah. We're still asking it.
One change. I mean, sort of impossible to say, really. I mean, can every match be played on the hottest day of the year? You know, would there be a way around that? Or getting rid of these cold days would be quite nice.
How much I know for club cricketers, like April hands is a thing that exists. Like you've had the off season, your hands have got soft. I couldn't believe how hard a cricket ball was when I caught one for the first time in 6 months the other day. Like, is that still a thing in professional cricket, or are you guys playing enough all year round that you're getting back into the season and you're ready to go?
Yeah, no, this is definitely a thing. Yeah, you can catch indoors all you want, really, but when your hands are so cold, that first one slaps in. It's disgusting, and like you still stood out there fielding, like not really quite able to feel your hands. You don't really want one smacked at you, especially the squares are hard. You don't want to be trapping a finger in this weather. God no.
Take that to spinner territory. How do you?
Yeah.
Are you tea bags in the pockets? 3 pairs of trousers, gloves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wear the whole lot. This week I would have been in. I think I had 5 layers on the bottom half, 6 layers on the top.
5.
Did you take them all off one by one to give the umpire?
Yeah. I think I was wearing two jumpers, base layers, 2 match shirts, a training shirt.
And every 6 balls, you take them all off.
No, hang on.
2 pairs of whites. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I understood how you could fit 5 layers on your top half, like vest, t-shirt. Like, how do you get 5 on the bottom half?
I just had my normal undershorts. I had my sort of full length leggings on. I had 2 pairs of whites, and there was one session I went out there with a pair of training trousers on as well. I was absolutely frozen because you can't risk like losing your hands. Do you know what I mean? If the blood stops going to your hands, you've got no chance. So you just can't take that. I'd rather be out there sort of somewhat a bit too hot. And then obviously, like you said, the hand warmers and everything. Yeah, as much as you can.
The gel ones, the ones with the little coin inside that you flick.
No, they're just you just shake them about and they heat up. And I've also got which I haven't worn, but I wore it in the pre-season games. The NFL sort of tube goes on the front. You sort of stick your hands in it. See the quarterbacks in the NFL have that. I've got one of those as well. I sometimes use, but you just can't risk your hands going cold, can you? As a spinner.
I think I'll always be fundamentally sad that I'm not a professional cricketer, but I also think I'm not sad I'm not a professional cricketer. That sounds rubbish. I'm quite happy being warm. Anyway, Nick, there were no questions for you. I don't know why that was, but I do want to ask you.
I use hand warmers.
Do you?
I once had to leave the field injured because of a hand warmer. I dived and dropped a catch to my left, and it was one of those gel ones, the gel hand warmer things, and it burst in my pocket as I dived, and I put my hand on it because I thought I'd stabbed myself, and I thought it was blood, and it was like corrosive acid. And I left the field with only my I had to take my trousers off, and the oppo thought I had an accident. And great times.
I just for a little peek behind the curtain. Our producer Nick
I saw it just pop up.
Oh no, not this story again. I have actually heard that story before. Mason, have you heard that story? Just for the record. Or was that
I have, no, not before. No, that was the first time.
Oh, that's nice. Okay, Nick, I'll let you. But also for the listeners. Nick, I am intrigued. It is a good story. I appreciate it. Nick, to finish us off, what round 4 is approaching? What are the storylines to look out for?
Oh, well, it's the first rest week, as Mason can attest to. So what? So there's one round in Div 1 happening, one round. Sorry, 2 teams Div 1, 2 teams in Div 2 not playing. Some good-looking games. Worcester are back at Kidderminster. Durham playing Essex in a game that looks quite interesting, and Surrey playing Hampshire in what was a repeat of the game that Surrey won the title in last year. All kinds of interesting games knocking around. A few guys in some. I think it's something like 14 players averaging north of 100 with the bat, which is, I know,
that's remarkable.
But I'm sure that won't last too long. There's still like 4 or 5 blokes averaging 200 plus, I think. But then equally, you've got Sam Cook with 15 wickets at 7 apiece. Here you go. So just getting it up now. We've got Matt Potts averaging 215 with a bat. Will Young,
Good
201.
player.
Mason, what are you averaging? You definitely know.
No, I don't. I just know I got 61. That's all.
A cool
Just keep
30.
watching
A
that
cool
innings.
31. A cool 31.
Anyway,
You're point
Nick,
66 behind James Vince in the averages. So
Oh well.
wonderful. I'm gonna stop Nick listing cricket info stats just as maybe some people find it interesting. Mason, we talk often about how crammed the schedule is. You've got a week off as a county cricketer. What does it look like? What are the plans?
Well, it's a week off from matches, but we've got a bit of T20 practice this week. Try and bank some of that in before, because obviously there's not much time between the last championship game and the first T20. So I think we've got a couple of inter-squad games there, a bit of T20 practice. I imagine we'll have a couple of days completely off at the weekend and then start getting ready for Headingley next week. But like you said, it is crammed, the schedule, so you get a bit of a chance like this. Is a good time to sort of reset and get ready for a big few weeks coming up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mason, for joining us. Thank you, Nick, for joining us. Nobody covers county cricket like The Cricketer, and you can get access to our coverage of all 18 teams online for as little as £3.99 a month. Our own top team of county champions have now won the Outstanding Online Coverage of Domestic Cricket Prize at the ECB Domestic Cricket Journalism Awards for 6 years running, so you don't have to take our word for it. Just click the link in the show notes to subscribe. Mason, again, thank you. Nick, again, thank you. Thank you for listening. If you do have any questions, make sure to get in touch at The Cricketer Mag on Twitter or email website at thecricketer.com. I'll remember that off by heart from next week. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you guys for joining us. See you next week.